I still remember that morning like it happened just yesterday. It was cold, raining, the kind of rain that seeps through your clothes and settles in your bones. I'd just finished a long night shift at the diner, exhausted but relieved to be heading home. All I wanted was a hot shower, maybe some leftover lasagna, and a few hours of sleep. But instead, I pulled into the driveway and everything felt wrong. The lights were off. The porch looked off. And then I saw them. Garbage, bags, lined up in front of the door. My bags, my things. Soaking wet, like they didn't matter at all. I stepped out of my car, shoes squishing into the muddy gravel, heart pounding harder with every step. When I tried the door, the key didn't work. I tried again and again. Nothing. He'd changed the locks. At first I thought maybe something was wrong. A mistake. A misunderstanding. My hands were shaking as I pulled out my phone and called David. He picked up. His voice wasn't rushed or confused, just cold. "It's over, Sarah. I've moved on. Don't try to come back." That was it. No explanation. No warning. Just final. I just stood there, in the rain, drenched in my waitress uniform, staring at the door to the house we bought together. The house I thought was ours. The one I paid for with my grandfather's inheritance. But the paperwork? That was all in his name. I'd trusted him when he said it'd be easier that way. His credit was better. He'd take care of it. I believed him. Still shaking, I opened our joint banking app. Maybe I could book a motel for the night. Figure things out. In the morning, 0. I checked again, thinking maybe it hadn't loaded right. Still 0. Then I checked my personal savings. Gone. Completely wiped. Every dollar. That's when it hit me. He didn't just leave. He planned this. He took everything. My money. My home. My trust. And he didn't even flinch. I stood there in the pouring rain, my whole life in plastic bags, wondering how I could have missed it. Wondering how someone who promised to love me could be this cruel. Have you ever trusted someone so deeply, only to have them destroy you? Let me know in the comments. Maybe we're not alone. With nowhere else to turn, I drove, through the rain to the one place I thought might offer some kind of explanation, maybe even help. David's mother, Patricia. I know. She was never exactly warm to me. But still, after 8 years of marriage, I thought maybe she'd at least hear me out. Maybe she didn't know what he'd done. When she opened the door, the first thing I saw was that same tight-lipped smile she always wore. The one that never quite reached her eyes. She was in her pearls, of course. Always dressed like she was expecting a magazine feature. And behind her, Amanda, David's sister, leaning in the doorway like she was watching a soap opera. Patricia looked me up and down, her nose practically twitching at the sight of my soaked clothes and swollen eyes. "Well," she said. Her voice clipped. "I suppose you're here to beg for money now that David's finally seen sense." Her words hit me harder than the rain ever could. "Patricia, I don't understand what's happening," I said, my voice cracking. "Everything's gone. The house, our savings." She let out a laugh, cold, sharp. "Oh, honey, did you really think someone like David would stay with a waitress forever? He's finally moving up in the world. He needs someone more suitable." She adjusted her designer watch, completely unbothered by the fact that I was standing there, soaked and broken. "You lasted longer than I expected," she added. "Most gold diggers would have shown their true colors years ago." "Gold digger?" I whispered, stunned. "I paid for our house. I supported him through his MBA. "With your grandfather's money," Amanda cut in, smirking. "Which you've been lording over David for years. Well, now he's paid you back. Guess it's time to find another rich old man to mooch off of. I couldn't breathe. 8 years of memories, holidays, birthdays, quiet nights on the couch. They all started to unravel in my mind. How had I been so blind? Where is he? I asked, voice a little stronger now. Where's David? Patricia didn't hesitate. On his honeymoon, she said, almost gleeful. With Jessica. You remember her, don't you? His new executive assistant. My knees went weak. Jessica. The woman he'd hired 6 months ago. The one he always stayed late with. The one who smiled at me at the Christmas party while sleeping with my husband. You knew, I said, looking between Patricia and Amanda. My voice wasn't angry. Not yet. Just heartbroken. You all knew. Of course we knew. Amanda scoffed. We helped him plan everything. Jessica's father is on the board at David's company. This marriage, it'll do wonders for his career. Unlike you. You've been holding him back for years with your little diner job. Patricia stepped forward and reached for the door. I suggest you leave before I call the police. You signed a prenup, remember? You get nothing. And just like that, she slammed the door in my face. In that moment, standing alone on her porch, soaked and shaking, I realized the truth. I hadn't just lost a husband. I'd been erased, replaced, and the people I thought were my family had been smiling through their lies the entire time. After that, everything just disappeared. By the time I made it back to my car, my credit cards had already been declined, one after the other. My phone, disconnected. Turns out it was on David's plan the whole time. Of course it was. I sat in that car for hours, too stunned to cry, too tired to think. I don't even remember falling asleep. Just the flickering streetlights in the Walmart parking lot and the sound of rain tapping against the windshield. That night, my car became my home. The next morning, I tried to check into a cheap motel, one of those rundown ones on the edge of town where the lights buzz and the front desk doesn't ask questions. But with no cards, no phone, and barely over $200 in my wallet, there weren't many options left. That's when I remembered the shelter. The women's center downtown. I used to volunteer there on weekends. Back when I thought I had something to give. Back when my life felt full. I didn't think they'd remember me. I wasn't even sure I wanted them to. But I walked in anyway, hugging a trash bag of clothes to my chest, my whole life packed into the trunk of a beat-up Civic. And then I saw her, Grace, the director. Same soft eyes, same calm voice. She took one look at me and didn't ask a single question. She just said, "Come in, Sarah, let's get you warm." She gave me a private room, usually saved for emergency cases, and a clean set of clothes, brought me tea, even tucked a blanket around my shoulders like I was something fragile. "You're in shock," she said quietly. "But you're stronger than you know. When you're ready, we'll help you fight back." I wanted to believe her. I really did. But in that moment, I felt so broken. Like whatever pieces of myself I had left were slipping through my fingers. I didn't see strength. I saw failure. Still, there was something comforting about being around women who understood. I kept busy in the kitchen, helping out where I could. Cooking was familiar. It gave my hands something to do, kept my mind from wandering too far. And it was there, in that small, humming kitchen, 3 days later, that everything started to change. It was a Thursday afternoon, just after lunch, when the whispers started floating through the shelter. I was in the kitchen, helping prep for dinner, when one of the volunteers rushed in, eyes wide. "The CEO of Montgomery Industries is here." Like the Alexander Montgomery. I almost dropped the pot I was holding. That name. It hit me like a punch to the chest. Montgomery Industries, David's company, the one he never let me near, said I wouldn't fit in at their events. Said it was better if I stayed out of the corporate stuff. But everyone in town knew Alexander Montgomery. Young, brilliant, came from a long line of money and turned the company into a tech empire. And from what I'd heard, he didn't tolerate liars or corporate games. I tried to duck out, honestly. The last thing I wanted was to be paraded around looking like I'd been chewed up and spit out by life. But Grace found me before I could escape. "He's meeting with the residents," she said gently, "asking for stories. He's planning a major donation. I think yours should be heard." I looked down at my shelter-issued clothes, touched my still unwashed hair. I wasn't ready. Not for this. Not for anyone. But Grace just smiled. "You belong here, Sarah, and your story matters." So there I was, sitting in a circle of folding chairs with 15 other women, my hands gripping a chipped coffee mug, like it could hold me together. And then he walked in. Alexander Montgomery. No suit, no entourage, just a button-down shirt, sleeves rolled, a notebook in hand. He wasn't what I expected. He listened, really listened, nodding, asking questions, scribbling down thoughts. When it was my turn, I almost didn't speak. But something in me cracked open. "I'm Sarah," I said quietly. "I'm here because my husband emptied our accounts and changed the locks while I was at work. He works for your company, actually." His pen froze mid-note. I hesitated, then continued. "David Chen. We were married for 8 years. I supported him through his MBA, used my inheritance to buy our house. He left me for his executive assistant, Jessica. Her father's on your board." The room went silent. And Alexander? He looked like he'd just put together a puzzle he hadn't realized was missing pieces. "David Chen," he repeated slowly. "The one who's been pushing for the senior director role?" I nodded, my voice barely a whisper. "That's him." He stood suddenly. "Grace, may I use your office for a moment?" Then, turning to me, "Miss Chen." "It's Miller now," I corrected, almost automatically. He paused, then nodded. "Miss Miller, would you come with me?" I followed him out of the room, heart pounding so hard I thought he might hear it. I didn't know what this meant. I didn't know if I'd said too much. But what I did know, the moment he looked at me in that office, eyes sharp with realization, was that something had shifted. Something big. And I had no idea just how much everything was about to change. The door clicked shut behind us, and suddenly it was just me and Alexander Montgomery in Grace's tiny office. He didn't sit down right away. He just looked at me. Really. Looked and then said something I never expected. "5 years ago, did you submit a business proposal for a corporate-sponsored network of community resource centers?" My mouth opened, but no words came out. That proposal? I hadn't thought about it in years. It was something I'd poured myself into back, when David and I were newly married, when I still believed I could do something meaningful with my social work degree. I drafted that plan late at night at our kitchen table, while David studied for finance exams. I'd submitted it to several companies, including Montgomery Industries. I did, I finally said. But my husband, he told me it was amateur, said it'd embarrass him if anyone at work saw it. He made me take it down from the platforms. I posted it on. Alexander's expression darkened. "Your proposal crossed my desk when I first took over the company. I remembered the name. It was one of the most thoughtful, well-structured community plans I'd ever seen. But when I reached out to follow up, the email bounced. The number didn't work. We assumed the applicant had backed out." I sank into the chair behind me. My heart felt like it was being squeezed. "He pulled it," I whispered. "David must have accessed my submission accounts and deleted it. He did, Alexander said quietly. We discovered it during a digital audit last year. We couldn't prove who it belonged to, but the internal access trail led back to your husband. He withdrew the submission using his credentials. I covered my mouth, trying to steady my breath. All those nights, the work I put in, gone. Not because I wasn't good enough, but because he decided it didn't matter. There's more, Alexander said. 2 months ago, David submitted a revised version of that same proposal to our board, claimed it was his own, used it as the foundation for his pitch to become senior director. Of course, that's why he left. That's why the timing was so clean. He didn't just take my money, he took my future. But Alexander wasn't finished. I'd like to offer you a position, he said, his voice steady, like this decision had already been made. Director of our new Community Impact Division. Your original proposal will serve as the blueprint. You'll have full creative control, resources, a team. Starting salary, $250,000, plus benefits and stock options. I blinked. I'm just a waitress. No, he said firmly. You're a brilliant strategist who's been silenced and undermined by someone who should have been lifting you up. That ends today. He pulled out his phone. With your permission, I'd like to call our legal team. David Chen committed fraud by stealing and misrepresenting your work. That's grounds for immediate termination. I stared at him, stunned. For the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't just reacting to what had been done to me. I was being seen, heard, believed. And maybe, just maybe, I was about to take everything back. Everything moved faster than I could have imagined. By the next morning, Alexander's legal team had already taken my full statement. They moved like a well-oiled machine, efficient, calm, and absolutely ruthless when it came to gathering evidence. They found everything: the deleted submission logs, the internal emails David had forwarded to himself, even metadata from the original file that traced it all back to me. By noon, David's carefully constructed world started to crack. He and Jessica had just returned early from their honeymoon, apparently hoping for a grand welcome and David's promotion paperwork waiting on his desk. Instead, they found their keycards deactivated and building security standing by the front entrance. Alexander waited for them in the lobby. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. David Chen, he said evenly, holding the folder with all the proof. You've been terminated for gross misconduct, including fraud and misrepresentation of intellectual property. Your access has been revoked effective immediately. David's face went from smug to stunned in a matter of seconds. Jessica's wasn't far behind. She glanced between Alexander and David, her expression shifting like she'd just realized. She'd bet on the wrong horse. You can't do this, David said, his voice rising. Do you even know who my father-in-law is? Alexander didn't blink. Was, he corrected. The marriage has been annulled. Mr. Williams sends his regards, along with a strong recommendation that you seek employment far, far away from our industry. The color drained from David's face, and that's when he saw me. I was standing a few steps behind Alexander, wearing a sleek suit their team stylist had picked out for me just that morning. Not flashy, just sharp, confident. My hair was clean, pulled back neatly. I didn't look like the woman he left crying in the rain. I didn't feel like her either. Sarah? His voice cracked. What are you doing here? I stepped forward, calm, steady. I looked him in the eyes, those same eyes I once thought held my future, and said, taking back what's mine. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. You stole my work, I continued, and you used it to build the next step of your career. You used me. My money. My trust. My time. And you thought I'd just disappear. I could feel him shrinking, like the weight of everything was finally pressing down on him. Well, I didn't disappear, I said. You left me with nothing, David, but that nothing became freedom. And now, I'm standing here as the new director of community impact at Montgomery Industries. The proposal you stole, it's being implemented. And the woman you discarded? I looked to Alexander, who gave me the smallest nod. She's the CEO's right hand. For once, David had nothing to say. Jessica didn't look at him. She just walked away, heels clicking against the marble floor. Security escorted him out a few minutes later. That was the last time I saw David up close. Amanda later told me he tried to come crawling back. Not because he loved me, but because he realized he'd lost everything. His job, his power, his plan. And me? I'd become the one thing he couldn't control, and it felt good. Not just because I won, but because I did it without losing who I was. I didn't fight dirty. I didn't scream or beg or sink to his level. I rose, and in doing that, I realized something. Justice doesn't always show up in a courtroom. Sometimes it shows up wearing a suit, standing beside you, giving you the space to speak your truth and finally be heard. Within a year, the community center had become more than just an idea. It was a movement. What started as one small project quickly grew, and before long, 10 centers had opened their doors, each one offering shelter, support, and a second chance for women who'd once felt trapped. Sarah poured herself into the work, not because she wanted recognition, but because for the first time in a long time, she felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. Every story she heard, every woman she helped, it all brought her closer to a sense of healing she didn't think was possible. Grace came on board full-time, taking on the role of program director. She was a natural, compassionate, organized, fierce when she needed to be. The two of them made a powerful team. What had once been a bond built through shared pain had now evolved into something stronger. A mission, a family, a purpose. As Sarah's world blossomed, the ghosts of the past began to fade. David, once so loud and threatening, simply disappeared. No headlines, no updates. He faded into the background, a man who had lost his power the moment Sarah took hers back. Jessica moved. On too, she remarried, started a new chapter, and kept her distance. Whatever guilt or shame she once carried was hers to work through now. Sarah had let that weight go. Even Patricia reached out eventually. Her voice cracked over the phone as she begged for another chance, swearing she didn't know the full extent of what had happened. Maybe she didn't. Maybe she did. But Sarah, for the first time, wasn't interested in reopening old wounds just to prove a point. She wished her mother well, but from afar. Through all of it, Sarah felt something she hadn't in years. Peace. The kind that settles deep in your bones. She had built something beautiful from the rubble. She had found her strength, her voice. And in the quiet moments, she even found love again. Not the desperate, clinging kind of love she once mistook for safety. But the real thing. Steady, kind, patient. Someone who didn't try to fix her or save her. Just stood beside her, believing in the life she was building. And for the first time in a long time, Sarah didn't feel broken. She felt whole. The room was warm with soft light, the clink of silverware fading as Sarah stepped up to the podium. It was the same ballroom where she used to pour coffee in silence, invisible in a sea of tailored suits and polished smiles. Tonight, though, she wasn't in the background. She stood center stage, as a board member, a leader, someone who had walked through the fire and come out forged, not broken. There was a quiet pride in the way she held herself, not boastful, just grounded. She glanced down at her growing belly, and then out at the crowd, her hand resting gently where new life stirred. Her voice didn't tremble when she began. I used to think betrayal would be the thing that defined me, she said, eyes scanning faces that had known her then, or thought they had. But it wasn't the pain that shaped me. It was what came after, the rebuilding, the reclaiming. She told them everything. Not the headlines, not the gossip, but the truth. The small, quiet moments of choosing herself again and again. She spoke of nights spent wondering if she'd ever feel safe again. Of the women who found their way to the community centers, and in doing so, reminded her she wasn't alone. Of grace. Of forgiveness that didn't mean forgetting, and strength that didn't always look loud. And finally, she spoke of love. Real love. The kind she found in Alexander. A man who never tried to outrun her past but simply sat beside her in it. Who walked with her, not ahead of her. Who made her feel safe in her own skin again. I used to want revenge, she said softly. To see the people who hurt me brought low. But that hunger faded, replaced by something better. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't watching them fall. It's living your truth so boldly, so unapologetically, that they become a footnote in your story. The room fell still, the air thick with emotion. But Sarah just smiled. A real one, soft and proud. She looked into the crowd and ended, the way she'd started, with honesty. If my story meant something to you, if it helped you feel seen, like, share, or subscribe, and maybe tell me, what moment changed your life forever? And then she stepped down, not just as a survivor, but as someone who had rewritten the ending.